In the serene sprawl of American suburbs, where white picket fences line neat front lawns, a sense of unspoken dread began to saturate the air. It started subtly, with shadows that seemed to linger a second too long, and a cold breeze that slithered through the streets without warning. No one suspected anything untoward, attributing these occurrences to their overactive imaginations. However, Margaret, a single mother with a vivid past, felt an undeniable presence watching her through the gossamer curtains of her living room. It was as if the very foundation of her seemingly perfect life was whispering secrets just beyond her grasp. Margaret's unease morphed into fear when she began receiving anonymous notes, each one more unsettling than the last. They were always written in a spidery script and always carried the same cryptic message: "I see you." Unlike in the movies, where the protagonist would foolishly dismiss such threats, she took them seriously, filing reports with the local police. Yet no real leads emerged, and her neighbors, with their saccharine smiles and feigned concern, only deepened the isolation she felt. The notes were soon followed by dissonant noises in the night, a faint tapping sound, not unlike fingernails on glass, as if someone or something was trying to make contact. Every night as Margaret lay awake, her mind raced with possibilities. She became a captive in her own home, the walls closing in like a padded cell, each creak in the floorboards another nail in her mental coffin. Her despair heightened with every glance at the bedroom mirror, where the reflection wasn't just her own. Sometimes it seemed to warp into something unfamiliar, something sinister. She found herself questioning reality, her mind riddled with thoughts of who could be tormenting her, and more terrifyingly, why. Her once cozy suburban home had transformed into an elaborate cage, one with invisible bars that followed her every move. It was one particularly oppressive evening when Margaret heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs. Her heart thundered in her chest as she climbed out of bed, determination overshadowing her fear. Gripping a heavy flashlight as her only form of protection, she followed the sound, her breaths shallow as she moved. The source of the noise, however, wasn't an intruder. It was much closer than she had let herself believe. Standing in the hallway, gazing into the dim mirror, she finally understood. The reflection staring back wasn't her motherly visage, but a shadow belonging to a past her mind had long repressed. Each haunting message, every eerie sound, had been orchestrated by none other than her splintering psyche, a ghost from her near-forgotten past longing to be acknowledged. It was a typical autumn evening in the quiet suburban neighborhood, the streetlights casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns. Mark sat in his dimly lit living room, his attention drawn to the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on the mantel. There was something about the night that tingled at the edges of his consciousness, a vague unease that seemed to seep from the cool October air. He had moved to this suburb for its promise of tranquility, a safe haven from the cacophony of city life. Yet, as he peered out the window, watching the leaves fall in slow spirals to the ground, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was subtly askew. Every night that week, strange occurrences had seeped into the routine of the suburbs. It started with a flickering streetlight outside his window, its intermittent glow a beacon of discomfort in the dark. Neighbors began whispering of odd happenings, a faint tapping on windows, footprints in the dew-laden grass leading nowhere, and an inexplicable chill that seemed to permeate the air even during the day. Mark's rational mind dismissed these as mere coincidences, pranks perhaps, by the local teens looking for a thrill. But the shivers that ran down his spine refused to be brushed away so easily. As days wore on, the atmosphere seemed to thicken with expectancy. Mark found himself waking up at odd hours, compelled by dreams of hollow-eyed figures, standing in silent vigil at the edge of his vision. One night, a soft rustling at the window pulled him from sleep. Heart pounding, he fought the urge to hide beneath the covers and crept to the window instead. Peering into the inky darkness, his breath fogged the glass, creating fleeting patterns of ghostly faces. But the street lay still, only the wind sighing through the trees. A deep-seated dread welled up, urging him to question the very fabric of what he believed was real. The following evening, Mark joined a neighborhood watch meeting in the community hall. Faces he knew by name all bore the same shadowed eyes, evidence of shared sleepless nights and quiet fears spoken aloud. The elders spoke of an old tale, a story of a man who once attempted to flee the drudgery of city life for solace in these parts, only to disappear into the thickets without a trace. It was said that his spirit lingered, searching for those who dared disrupt the sacred silence he sought. As they whispered this tale, a gust of icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Mark felt it then, a presence heavier than the darkness, breathing down his neck. His skin prickled, and he understood that some mysteries were best left undisturbed in their eerie suburban cradle. The tranquility of Oak Ridge Lane was just a clever facade, always casting the illusion of safekeeping under the soft glow of evening streetlights. Every morning as Daniel walked his dog through the pristinely kept yards, he'd nod to the neighbors, exchanging pleasantries that felt as hollow as the breeze that swept through the trees. He moved here a year ago, drawn by its charm, but feeling an undercurrent of unease he'd push aside, unable to pinpoint what lay beneath the picturesque surface. And then there was the strange feeling of being watched, a shiver that crept down his spine when he least expected it, though his eyes would catch only empty windows and unassuming doorways. One night, Daniel woke to a sound, a low hum, more vibration than noise, like a distant generator. No matter how hard he tried, sleep was no longer an option. He decided to walk to the kitchen and brew some tea, hoping to calm his restless mind. As he strained to listen over the kettle's whistle, the hum seemed to intensify and took on an almost melodic quality, weaving through the walls. He followed it subconsciously, trying to pinpoint its origin. The sound led him to the den where a shadow lay, a subtle alteration in the air, as if a ripple had passed through the fabric of space. In that moment, he noticed the freshly placed bookshelf against the wall, a piece he'd never recalled seeing. With a cautious curiosity, Daniel ran his fingers over the spine of the wooden shelf. Suddenly it slid, revealing not a wall, but another room entirely. It was small and brightly lit, with screens embedded into the walls, every one displaying live footage of the surrounding houses. The hum had grown clear, a slow cycle of surveillance feeds flickering, changing, each capturing a different slice of suburbia life. His heart raced as he realized the truth. He was privy to the secret eyes of Oak Ridge Lane. Initially overwhelmed by the discovery, Daniel's days were an agony of apprehension. He knew he had to act, but paranoia whispered caution. He imagined confronting his neighbors, picturing their faces twisted in betrayal or denial. He paced his room each night, scrutinizing the screens, the realization growing that whoever had set this up was still watching, and watching him. It was only when he noticed the feed from his own living room, saw himself sipping tea while fear dug into his eyes, that the decision crystallized. The next morning, under the shroud of dawn, Daniel quietly left Oak Ridge Lane, leaving behind walls that watched and whispered, disappearing into the world beyond their gaze. In the quiet suburb of Windridge Hills, where every street seemed to mirror each other in their eerie symmetry, Regina found herself alone in her newly acquired home nestled at the end of a winding cul-de-sac. The previous owner had vanished without a trace, leaving the house to be sold at a tempting price. Regina spent her days unpacking, her evenings curating her garden, which the last owner seemed to have loved, and her nights listening to the unsettling silence that pervaded the area. As the weeks progressed, she began to notice slight irregularities, misplaced keys, lights left on that she was sure she had turned off, and shadows flitting across the walls at odd hours. Despite the growing disquietude, Regina managed to convince herself it was nothing more than her imagination, until the letters began to arrive. At first glance, the letters seemed innocuous. Plain envelopes slipped under the door, always unsigned, containing cryptic notes written in an elegant hand. Greetings turned to strange musings about her day-to-day activities, accusatory, as if from a resentful onlooker privy to her every move. The notes progressed to warnings, and nights became filled with a strong sense of being watched. Regina's mind twisted around the idea of an intruder cohabiting her space, but extensive searches turned up nothing. Nevertheless, Regina felt exposed in her own home, a prisoner under surveillance. Her friends dismissed her concerns, attributing them to stress and isolation. Still, the letters persisted, slowly shredding the fabric of comfort that her home once promised. Tormented by sleepless nights and the dread suffusing her days, Regina cast a skeptical gaze at every passerby and neighbor. Despite this, no discernible suspect emerged. A change of strategy was necessary. She set up cameras and monitored every angle, hoping to catch a glimpse of her elusive stalker. Her endeavors revealed a chilling reality. There was hardly anything to see. The footage was benign, devoid of even a flicker of abnormality. Envelopes appeared without a hint of disturbance. Regina became ensnared in the grotesque theater of her deteriorating mind. Her own reflection seemed a stranger's mimicry, capturing a growing paranoia. Ensnared by distrust and ambiguity, she futilely combed through the footage, each reel a laughing ghost of the mystery that ensnared her psyche. Her breaking point came when she realized the letters were no longer arriving under the door, but rather placed lovingly on her pillow, an intimate intrusion and a cruel violation. This breach toppled reality into chaos, her home collapsing into itself in a symphony of shadows. It was on this night, fraught with the resolute clutches of insomnia, that she cracked. She scanned every corner with frenzy, shaking with the fear of an unseen hand. The letters, scattered with mocking precision throughout her sanctuary, led her on an aimless quest room by room. In a cathartic crescendo of adrenaline and fury, she found her revelation, not in the walls nor in her garden, but within herself. The pen in her hand scribbled out the horrors she had received, a forgotten sanity fractured by loneliness, whispering revelations she refused to acknowledge.